Oh boy, we're in trouble now. We are in so much trouble now. Unbelievable. Everyone is here. What's going on, good people?
Hey,
And
Can you all hear me all right? Can you all see me? I mean, of course, it's who cannot see
all
me?
the above, all the
Okay,
above, brother.
excellent.
George, you're not
Okay.
nearly close enough. I'm used to having you like
Yeah, right.
2 feet away from me.
Exactly. For those watching, oh yeah, I should put this disclaimer out there. Like, we are now live on Facebook. All right, so just so you all know, and for those watching, for those listening, what Melissa was just talking about, Melissa sits next to me at Ain't Too Proud and has to deal with my mood swings. just trying to make this up. Anyway, listen, I am so glad that you're here. Welcome, everyone. I do believe that we have a bunch of people watching already. Let me just check over here. Oh, yeah, we got a whole bunch of people over here. So, and I just gave the audience a little bit of an introduction to today's topic, which is diversifying your efforts. In the words of Tom Barney, make the money and do something with it. And thank you all so much for making yourself available today. I've kind of curated these panels. Ooh, I get like serious delay going on. Anyway, I curated these panels so to show a wide variety of uh, guests who not only hold down uh, a full workload as a musician, but also have branched out into different endeavors. All right. I wanted to kind of show part of a redefinition of what it means to be a musician, right? We're not in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, whatever anymore. Chances are that, and even if you take it out of the music realm, if you take it into corporate life, so to speak, people in corporate jobs very often have a number of jobs as well. All right. So we are certainly not alone in that. Our business has changed. You could say our business has done a 180, 360, call it what you will. Wouldn't it behoove us as musicians to change with it as well, and therefore change our definition of what it means to be a musician, right? Um, Let me open it up because I don't want to do too much talking. But let me open it up. I'm going to go clockwise on my screen. Sean Edmonds, you're next. What's going
hey,
on?
George,
All
what's
right.
happening, man?
Listen, why don't you give us a breakdown of this redefinition of what that means to you and what you have done in terms of diversifying your efforts. And also, before we continue, everyone who's not talking, do me a favor and mute yourself. It does help for noise purposes. All right, Sean Edmonds, take it away.
Yeah, for me, one thing, just since I've graduated college and been in the business of music, man, my relatives have just been on me about the financial aspect of this business. And probably until I was in my early 30s, I didn't really pay too much attention to that because I was just out here having fun.
Right.
You know, it's like you get a gig, you're touring around, and I started on cruise ships when I graduated college. Did that for a time, moved to New York, and probably within 8 months got the Count Basie gig. So, it was just basically get on the bus. Okay, cool. Where are we going next? You
Mm.
know, and just my relatives being on me and on me and on me, and especially my uncle. I started, playing the stock market, starting out easy with mutual funds,
Right.
and then a friend of mine, he was like, hey man, we really need to get into real estate, man. And I didn't know anything about it. And I didn't have any money saved up at the time because, for me, like I said, since college, I was just kind of out there. Where am I going next? Where's the next gig? And I never paid myself first.
Right. Right.
I just kind of got money, paid my bills. I was always smart enough to pay myself forward in that I think when let's see, when I joined the Basie band, I got about 10 months ahead on my rent. And I pretty much stayed there for years.
Okay.
So that gives you kind of a pad not to have to take stuff you don't want to do.
Right.
But, my buddy was like, real estate, real estate, real estate, man. And I trusted him after a period of time because I knew that he was a smart guy and that he had people in his family that knew what they were doing in terms of flipping properties.
Right.
And so he said, man, yeah, I realize you don't have any savings, but tell you what, why don't you give up your 1-bedroom apartment on 143rd and Broadway? I'm sorry, on 115th and Broadway. Move in with me, sleep on my couch for a year. Then we'll have the down payment for a piece of property.
Right.
Holding hum about it for a bit. So I finally did it, and it didn't really make that big of a difference because I was out on tour with Basie and I was gone most of the time.
Right.
And sure enough, in a year, I had enough for a down payment for a piece of property. Went in with 4 other musicians, 2 of which I knew, and one of which I knew, 2 I didn't. It was my friends' buddies.
Right.
And it was in the early 2000s when they were still doing stated income loans.
Right.
Which was a drag for most people. I made it work, And we ended up having to sell our property because we had a balloon payment coming up and couldn't, make it. But, I sold my property and paid cash for my house in Jersey.
Right.
So I don't have a mortgage. And I don't even have to tell you what kind of freedom that comes with.
Yeah.
And since I did that, I pay myself rent every month.
Right.
So the rent that I was paying, I put it in a separate account. And, after 4 years, holy cow.
That is a lot of money.
That's a lot of money, man.
Yeah.
All because a friend of mine and my family just stayed on me and stayed on me and stayed on me, that I got rid of this musician's mentality of, where's the next gig? Oh, this is fun. Oh,
Right. Right.
So that's basically how I diversified my career, because I've only been a trumpet player my whole life. I've had a couple of private students
Yeah.
here and there, and I taught an after-school program for, maybe 6-8 months.
Right.
But other than that, I've never done anything else other than play the
Right.
trumpet. So
And but that's an incredible story right there, and it's incredible insight. This whole idea of paying yourself, putting whatever, if you are in the position of owning your own home, putting money, the money that you would have paid for rent into another account. It doesn't get any more driven than that, And on top of that, I also wanted to mention, like, you just when we started with the show, you finished your PhD, is that correct?
I didn't finish yet.
Or a
I
master,
should be
or
finished by December. I'm getting a doctorate in classical trumpet. Yeah.
that also like speaks to branching out. Yes, everybody's applauding.
Yeah, the backstory to that was I sat down one day because, people in this business, they help you out,
Yep.
and the guy that helped me out probably the most was Bob Milliken, And I have gotten recommended to play lead on some pretty big gigs that if it wasn't for him,
Right.
I definitely wouldn't have done that.
Right.
And I started to think to myself when he retired, because Bob didn't really retire. It was just kind of like he stopped getting called. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Right.
And he was a top guy in town. And I figured, like, uh-oh, if that happened to Bob Milliken, well, when I get to be in my 60s, they're probably going to stop calling me. So what am I qualified to do? I've played trumpet my whole life. I have no other skills. I'm not interested in anything else. I see Barry Danilian sitting there, he went back for Oriental medicine,
Yeah, don't give it away.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
It's okay. No. I'm totally kidding.
All right, sorry. But it's just like, wow, that's great, but I couldn't do that.
Right.
you
Right.
know? So I thought, okay, well, what can I do when the contractors quit calling me? Well, hey, man, I've got all this knowledge from turnaround and blah, blah, blah. So, but I'm going to need to go to college.
Right.
And I got my bachelor's in 87, but as you know, that's a useless degree.
Mm.
So it was like, okay, so I went back, got my master's,
Right.
and got my doctorate, and it's like, at least now, I won't have to work a day gig that I don't want to do.
Right.
I
Right.
can segue into that if people stop calling me to
Right.
play.
Right, right, right. So that's, that it, not, I don't mean to interrupt you or anything. I'll do that to all of my guests all the time. So just hang with me, okay? But I did wanted to point out to the audience the idea of continuing education, right? And that there is sort of a basis for that, right? The way you handled your financial business, the way you handled your real estate investment, and all of that is sort of the basis for continuing education. Okay, because education in the U.S. costs money. Keeping it real, right? Um, all of that is a necessity, and all of that is a manifestation of diversifying your efforts, in my opinion, right? And again, thank you so much for sharing that. That's priceless. That is really really deep. If you don't mind, I will move on now. Melissa Tong, you're next. Give us a breakdown of your latest venture, because I found that fascinating to hear and read about it in social media.
Thank you so much. Well, briefly, I'm a violinist and a pianist, and I also sing, and I have been plagued with repetitive strain injuries basically since my early 20s.
Wow.
I've had a serious yoga practice for close to 2 decades now. And between the yoga, I took Alexander, I've been taking Alexander technique lessons as well. And then a practice called acro yoga, which is kind of like a form of partner acrobatics. Those three things really in combination helped save my career.
Mm.
And during the beginning of the pandemic, I found myself in a very similar position to, everyone here, where all of a sudden I had too much time on my hands,
Mm.
too much time to think, but also I took it as an opportunity to do my first 200-hour yoga teacher training, which was something that I had been wanting to do for probably close to 15 years, but
Wow.
never had the time. And I said, you know what? It's now or never. So I did that. And then I ended up doing 2 more teacher trainings, including one for acro yoga and then one for anatomy. And I started giving free lessons to those in the arts community who were in a similar position of suffering,
Right.
emotionally, physically, obviously, financially.
Yeah.
And through that work, I started realizing that a lot of musicians have very similar physical habits, movement patterns, largely stemming from what instrument they play.
Wow.
And it also just so happens that my partner is an incredible body worker. He specializes in muscle activation techniques, and he's a personal trainer, and he's been also an ergonomics consultant, and he has over 20 years experience in that arena.
Right.
And he's also worked with some musician clients. And as I started talking to him about these similarities and through lines that I was seeing in some of my private clients and during my yoga classes that I started teaching, we started developing a company that we're now calling Be Neutral. And it's specifically to help empower musicians and educate musicians on their own bodies. It is absolutely crazy to me that we spend hours upon hours upon hours thinking about such small specific movements of our fingers, of our arms, but we don't actually understand how the body globally functions. So
Right.
it's my hope to take this knowledge and take this passion to be able to prevent people from having to go through 2 decades of a journey like I did.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, this lips. Hello, we got like at least three players here on this panel, you know, trumpet players work with their lips. Same thing goes for reed players, you know. All of what we do as musicians is incredibly specialized. And it would only make sense that we do something to help us out what that is concerned. I mean, that's, you know, and that's why I thought that whole idea of having this company and specializing in musicians, specializing in what we are doing, brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And, you know, again, like what you just said, like your passion was with this yoga study, with acro yoga, with all of that, partially out of necessity, partially also because you were interested and you found something and just moved into it. And I thought that was so brilliant. That's you know, that's exactly what we're talking about today. Like this is, in addition to all the other examples, perfect example of diversifying your efforts, right? Is there anything else that comes to your mind right now?
Well, I also just wanted to add that I think as musicians, we are hardy and resourceful.
Yeah.
And when throughout the ages, I think we've all figured out a way to just make it work and to do what we do.
Yeah.
And if nothing else, I think the pandemic has proven to us that we are survivors and that we will do what is necessary to keep going, to keep moving forward. And I think that's really key for us to know as we move into whatever we're moving into.
Yeah, most definitely. No, you're totally right. You're totally right. That makes a lot of sense. You're absolutely right. You know, our survival skills as musicians. Let me just take it back to 2008 financial crash, right? I think everybody here on this panel remembers that, right? I know that in my neighborhood, uptown, people were freaked out, okay? Corporate jobs, gone. All of that gone. Everybody overnight is a freelancer. Musicians in my neighborhood, I was still living in Harlem, were like, well, this is what we do. This is not new to us. So musicians are in a position, to your point, Melissa, musicians are in a great position to diversify, to open ourselves up, to be aware of perhaps general trends and move with them, okay? And branch out. It's that simple. There was one thing that I also wanted to add to your point right now, and that is, I've been a musician my whole life. I come from a family, not from a family of musicians, but I had musicians in my family all my life. I've seen the other generation deal with this, and I've seen the lack of any kind of preparation, any kind of physical routine maintenance, call it what you will, right? Where by the time you're 60, as Sean says, you know, the calls may stop happening simply because your physicality is not there anymore, right? You're not 20 anymore. You're way past your 30s at that point. You know, things start to deteriorate. We all suffer from chronic problems that come from our instruments. This redefinition that I'm talking about, it probably also manifests itself in the thought that goes into your choice, into the choice that Barry Danilian is going to talk about soon enough. You know, that we need to, in order to keep this going, to keep the workload as a musician going, we need to branch out, look after, because branching out also can mean look after ourselves. Okay, let's not forget that. All right, Melissa, thank you so much. Next up, Jeffrey Campbell, what's going on? Where are you still muted?
Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can hear you. Awesome. So glad you're here, dude.
How you doing? Thanks
Good.
for having me, George.
Absolutely. So listen, Jeffrey, tell us, I don't want to give it away. I want you to talk about it. Tell us about this diversifying of efforts and what that meant for you, because you went a route that I don't think I've had a guest on who actually did what you did.
Well, I assume you're talking about writing a book, which
Hello. Yes.
I don't want to give the wrong impression. It was a labor of love.
Right.
You know, I'm not getting rich off of book sales any more than we get rich off of our CD sales. It's the way it is.
Right.
Now, if you're Michelle Obama, you know, you get a nice advance and sell hundreds of thousands of copies, yes.
Yeah.
But for a guy like me on a small publisher, the money is, you know, inconsequential, really. It was, you know, for the amount of time I put into it, it was a labor of love. So it didn't really change my income bracket at all. It's not keeping the lights on. It was just something I did as a creative outlet, really.
Right.
So I wouldn't say, I wouldn't advise anybody to go into publishing. You think the music business is hard? Check out the publishing business.
Yeah, this,
literary, oh Lord.
Yeah.
But the thing I really enjoyed about writing, besides getting in touch with a lot of demons and cathartic stuff like that, is it's unlike recording, you're not buying the latest piece of software. It's you, your brain, your fingers on the laptop. I didn't go, if I only had this great compressor, this book would be better, you know?
No.
So,
yeah.
But to your point about the industry changing, by the way, my book is called Do Stand So Close. It's about a year I spent on the road with Sting. When I first moved to New York, I moved to New York in 1987, back in the good old days, right? And I said, I'm gonna give New York 1 year. I moved here from North Carolina. I'd gone to the University of Miami. I'd studied there, but I only made it through 3 years and dropped out because I was a rock pop guy. I wasn't a jazzer. And I realized that my first love was truly playing rock, pop music, soul music. So to Sean's point, yeah, go get your doctorate if you want to teach. I mean, people say that to me. They go, well, why don't you go finish your undergrad and get a teaching job? It's like, that's not the way it works. Get your master's and your doctorate, then you get a good teaching job.
Right.
My brother had an undergrad and a master's from North Texas State and was just hitting the ceiling till he went and got his doctorate.
Right.
And he got a decent job teaching. So I left Miami, moved back to North Carolina, had a buddy here that I'd gone to school with in Miami. He said, come up and visit. I came up and fell in love with the city.
Right.
So I saved up some money, and I didn't move here with $100 in my pocket. I moved here with $3,500 in my pocket in 1987, which was, you know, a substantial amount of money. Today, that'd be $10,000 at least, right? So I came ready, and I said, I'll give it a year. But I was one of those guys that hit the lottery. And 8 months into, well, let's put it this way. I said, I'm going to give it a year. And on the eve of my 1 year anniversary in New York, I was playing Madison Square Garden with Sting. So I was like, whoa, what happened? I was selling candy on Broadway. I was working at the Gershwin Theater selling candy when Sting hired me. I had to quit my concession job to join Sting's band. 2 weeks later, I'm on Saturday Night Live. A month later, I'm in Rio in front of 250,000 people. And, you know, so people say, hey, man, should I move to New York? I'm going, don't ask me. I hit the lottery.
Right.
But the downside of that was once the Sting gig ended, I found myself back in New York unemployed.
Right.
And it was tough. I did years of club dates.
Right.
And I felt like, wow, I really did this backwards, playing in the Garden, then playing all the catering halls of Long Island and the Bronx. It was humbling. Yeah. But, you know, what was I going to do? Retire? I was in my late 20s. I couldn't do that.
Right.
So I kind of did backwards. I look at it like a rookie who wins the Super Bowl or the World Series. Right. My first season in, I was, oh, I got this figured out. No, I didn't. Fortunately, I found Broadway, and that's what kind of changed my trajectory. Right. I dated a girl when I was younger, and I think she's a doctor now, but she had said, the thing about being a musician, you guys can make a killing, but you can't make a living. And it's really true. It's really hard to make a living as a musician. Right. I mean, I was saying yes to every club date, every singer-songwriter I could do on Bleecker Street, every jingle that it was drying up at that point. And I was still barely making ends meet. And that's cool when you're younger because the struggle, you know, it validates you to be struggling. Right. But as you get older, you're like, man, this struggle is not near as romantic as it used to feel. So in that regard, God bless Broadway. Right. And I live in Hell's Kitchen, so I could walk to work as opposed to driving to Connecticut or driving to Long Island. So Broadway felt great to me. And then, as we all know, you also got to be lucky. You got to be good. You got to be lucky to make it happen, right? And I had actually was doing Seussical, which was supposed to be a big hit, and it was a flop. But the conductor said to me, hey, I'm getting ready to do this musical based on ABBA. Do you want to join me? I said, yeah, sure, ABBA, who cares? And there was Mamma Mia, 14 years.
Yeah.
14 years of a steady paycheck, right? You're talking about the 2008 crash. I never thought I'd have job security. I saw my friends with straight jobs losing their jobs left and right, and Mamma Mia just kept right on clicking.
Exactly.
So luck has a lot to do with it too.
Right.
But when people ask me about diversifying, when I moved here, it was funny. I used to think you talk about the 50s and the 60s when it was just nonstop recording.
Right.
And you used to think, man, it must have been great to have been here in the 50s or the 60s. Now, looking back at the 80s feels like the 50s or the 60s to me. There was tons of clubs. There were still recording sessions. I mean, all the recording studios are condos now, except for Avatar Hit Factory, right? Or Power Station.
Power Station, yeah.
Hit Factory, Record Plant, Clinton. They're all condos. They're gone.
Right.
You know, I came here to be a session guy, and it didn't pan out because I got here at the end. But I tell people, man, you better be able to record yourself at home. Do you know how to run Logic or Pro Tools? Do you have a good signal chain, a good microphone? Because it's all about Dropbox and your home studio.
Oh yeah, most definitely.
Taking it one step further, I mean, I played my first paying gig when I was 13. So music's all I've ever done.
Right.
And I spent my whole life thinking doing anything besides music would be a fate worse than death. Right. I think the way the industry is now, that's maybe not the most healthy attitude to have.
Right.
I had lunch with one of my younger subs a couple of years ago, and you know, he had subbed on Broadway. He had done Broadway on the Road. He had worked with a singer-songwriter. They played Coachella. I mean, he had kind of seen the mountaintop. He saw the lay of the land.
Right.
He was in his mid-30s. He's like, I'm not sure what I want to do. I said, man, do not think of yourself as a failure if you make $1 not playing the guitar. And he went back and learned how to code software. He's now teaching how to code software and playing music that he loves, as opposed to playing cover tunes in a band that he doesn't want to be in. Right. So I think it has gone 180. And now it's like, I almost feel like, and I guess we always think we should have gone the other way. We should have zigged when we zagged. But boy, I've compromised a lot of my art to try to keep the bills paid. If I had to do ever, maybe I would try to have an income stream non-musical, just so I could really pick and choose, which is what I think Broadway allowed me. A lot of my friends, my rock and roll friends, they rolled their eyes at Broadway. Oh man, you're out to pasture. I'm like, that's not true. I said, you can make a good living working 24 hours a week. So the rest of the time doing whatever you want to do. Write that book, record that bebop record, or whatever you want to do. So I think Broadway frees us up to be more creative, not less creative.
Yeah. You make a very, very good point. I had I've done these live videos now for a little over a year, right? And one of the very first subject was the day gig, the dreaded day gig, right? Because I was a construction worker for a number of years, right? And I know you probably won't, think of me as a construction worker, but there it is, So, and I had a follow-up video with Ulysses Owens, who's a drummer here in town, Ulysses Owens Jr., right? Talking about the day gig, and I made the exact same point that you're making. Like, Broadway can be seen as a day gig. Right? Let's not confuse the issues here. Just because you play Broadway doesn't necessarily mean that all you listen to at home is Broadway. It doesn't mean that all your Sean is laughing, but it's true. I mean, that your heart and soul is in show tunes. It can be, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it definitely, there's a skill level that comes with being a musician and with being a professional musician, and if I've learned anything from my older generation, right, that skill level makes it possible for you to go into endeavors like a Broadway pit, right? Or should make it possible. And you should be able to reach in, do the job based on your skill level alone, and still have a second or a third or a fourth venture in your head, in your soul, in your heart, hopefully, where you express yourself as an artist, right?
Yeah.
Please go ahead.
I'm just going to say, I've learned I see Broadway as a skilled labor position.
Yeah.
I'm a carpenter. Okay, Mr. Lloyd Webber, where do you want to hammer these nails?
Right.
Then I go home in my free time and follow my muse. So I'm an architect in my free time and a carpenter in the Broadway pit. And I don't see any problem with that. And people go, well, how don't you get tired playing the same tunes every night? And my wife says, show me a job that doesn't have repetition in it.
Yeah.
Dennis cleans teeth all day long. I mean, every job has repetition. And the other guitarist at Mamma Mia said to me one time, which I thought was a great point, he said, go on the road with Lady Gaga. Let me know when the set list changes every night. It doesn't. And I've been around the world. It's brutal touring, even at the highest levels. It's brutal. It's fun. But once you've done it, I don't know, it's not for everybody. So me to play the same 2 hours of music in my jeans and t-shirt and then go home every night, what's not to love about that?
Yeah, most definitely. No, you're totally right. You're totally on the point. And also, I do want to put that out there to the audience. You are working on another book now. Is that correct?
That's correct. I only spent 1 year with Sting. I've been doing this a long damn time. And I would find myself telling stories, doing podcasts and telling stories about Aretha or Sammy Davis Jr. or Michael Bublé. They go, wow, is that in the book? And I was like, no, it's not in the book. So I thought, let me write another book. And COVID said, hey, here's some free time. So I took the pandemic and said, because I had just started a new show when the pandemic hit, Mrs. Doubtfire. We played 3 previews.
Oh, wow. Yeah. But, sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying, so I took the downtime to start writing again.
Yeah. Most definitely. Now that's a lot of what partially of what's happening here with this particular panel and with the one from last week is, of course, it is influenced by the pandemic. There's no way, I can't sugarcoat that. Like we've all, as musicians, we've been out of work for a year plus. There's no two ways about it. And partially we've been influenced by that fact to seek other employment. Yet I do also want to just make sure that the focus is shifting. Like the focus of what it means to be a musician is shifting, at least in my opinion. Barry Danielian, thank you so much, Jeffrey. Barry Danielian, you're next. Tell us what all of this means to you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Cool. Hey, everybody. I'm enjoying hearing everybody's stories. Well, the truth is change is ongoing, right? Like, I mean, that's the only real reality is things are always changing. So the question is, do we flow with it or flow against it, right? A lot of what everybody's talking about, I have experienced and perceived it for a long time. I came to town a little earlier than Jeff, probably like the mid 80s, but I kind of went on the road immediately. But I came to town also to kind of be in the recording studio, seem to be a studio musician, because that kind of fit. I've kind of got musical ADD. So once I can play something, I'm like ready to do the next thing. Right. So that studio thing of going in and you don't know what it's going to be, you got to suss it out, play it great, and then you're on to the next thing. That really suited my personality. And I like playing a lot of different kinds of music. But by the mid 80s, like all I got of that scene was kind of the fumes of the bus that had left, that stuff was all pretty much dying off. Right. So I went on the road. And when I was touring with Tower, Emilio and Doc, who were my elders, they really hit me to this concept of passive income streams, to be writing or producing, or to just have stuff going on that can be earning you money, mailbox money. That's what they called it.
Right.
So I got into the technology actually prior to Tower of Power, like in the early 90s. I started doing Logic when it was like eMagic Notator on an Atari computer. And I really embraced technology early on, which for a keyboard player or maybe a guitar player, that may not seem odd, but for a brass player, that was really odd because I'm a trumpet player. I play trumpet, I play high notes.
Of course.
So I was like getting into creating tracks and being able to record myself and doing all that stuff like really early on. And when I saw the handwriting on the wall with a lot of what everybody's talking about the scene changing, like I kind of already had this thing in place, and that saved my butt really, because I've managed to keep the studio scene died, but my scene at home hasn't died. I've been doing records and playing on people's stuff and recording tracks and writing music for like I just keep that all happening.
Right.
The budget shrunk, record companies went away, but people can afford to pay me to play on their track. They can't afford to rent a studio and hire musicians, you know, so I just found myself adapting to all that.
And then on top of that,
parallel to that was my martial arts scene. Like when I was doing Priscilla, in between shows, I was going to New York Athletic Club and holding pads and training people in Muay Thai and in Kali. And so I kept that going. And I've always kind of felt like whatever you love to do, like love is such an expansive thing. So if you love it, you're going to find the time and the energy and the discipline and all those things that you need to make it happen. So why put these limitations on yourself? Who says you can't be a musician and an entrepreneur and a this and whatever it is that you love to do? You should just try and do it, not constrain yourself. So martial arts has always been a thing. I taught in town for like 10, until I went on the road with Bruce, I was teaching like 3 days a week, teaching martial arts classes. That kind of like getting banged up doing that kind of got me more into the Chinese medicine thing. I had been using acupuncture and herbs since the 90s, since the 80s, since I was touring. I was really drawn to it and interested in it. But when I started seeing things changing and what Sean mentioned about Bob, that was a real wake-up call, because he's our hero. Like, here's the great Bob Milliken. The phone's not ringing to call him anymore. Are you kidding me? Like, if that's happening to him, like, what's going to happen to me? So I started thinking very seriously about, maybe it's time to get something else really in place. So aside from all the other passive income stuff with my writing and production stuff. So I went back to school, enrolled in Pacific College in their master's program for Chinese medicine to do herbs, acupuncture, bodywork, cupping, the whole nine. And like really have been like, that's been a full-time job because it's such an intense course of study. I just graduated. I'm like, before I logged on, I was studying for my herb board exams, and it's constant studying. But it's a beautiful thing because like what Melissa was saying, like so many of my friends are so, like I had somebody we all know, I'm not going to say who their name is, but they were here earlier and I'm helping them out with carpal tunnel with their hands. We're all suffering because we're like in these fixed positions for decades doing what we're doing, and our bodies are tweaked out, and we're in this mindset of, I just got to do whatever I need to do to make the music happen without thinking about, am I taking care of this instrument of my body so that I can make the music? So I just see it as a real beautiful way to be able to help people. And interestingly enough, it's kind of like that same studio musician thing. I don't know who's going to walk through the door and what it's going to be. And I got to figure it out. I got to suss it out and make it happen for them. And even that same person comes back the next week. They're not the same person as they were a week ago. Things have changed in that week. I have to suss that out, figure out what they need to help them. So it appeals to that same kind of mindset, like the producer mindset or the studio musician. What does this person, I'm getting ready to blow a solo for this track. What is going to really help this track? I can't play what I want to flex. I got to play what's going to serve this music. And I have to be able to like discern what that is. So that thought process is something that, from martial arts, from Chinese medicine, from music, it's all like kind of interwoven into one big thing for me. And I think that now COVID has really kind of illuminated that this is like really a necessity. We have to start thinking this way now as musicians. Like we have to really just expand our consciousness in terms of what we're capable of doing. And I think that the truth is that all of us have been able to succeed in this business playing music. So by definition, we have what it takes to be able to do that in anything that we would choose to do if we love doing it.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Go ahead. I don't mean to
No, I
interrupt
mean,
you.
that's it. And I just think that in 10 years, it's going to be something different. It's always going to be changing. And we always have to adapt to what it is. I mean, like, I listen sometimes, somebody will send me a YouTube of something like me playing with Eddie Palmieri's band. And I'm like, God damn, if I had to play that now, I don't know if I could, I could do it, but I'd be like sore for 2 days. Like I can't do what I did when I was 20 years ago.
Right.
My physiology is not the same. I've had to figure out, like, you have to like kind of how can I get the job done, but with the physical being that I am now, not
Right.
20 years ago.
Right.
And that's like kind of an ongoing process too, because what we do, even though it's deeply spiritual, we're doing it through the medium of a physical body.
Right.
And that physical body is constrained by certain realities that are inescapable.
Right. Well, that's so you're touching on so many points right there. This is really fantastic. Um, there's one thing that I wanted to add to that, right? Before we get to Mark Gross and hear his uh, manifestation, so to speak. Back in Vienna, I grew up in Vienna. Back in Vienna, I ended up playing a lot with so-called gypsy musicians, right? There are two main tribes, Roma and Sinti, right? I played with both of those tribes. Me not being gypsy made that somewhat easier, right? But a friend of mine refers to the gypsy population of Austria and Europe as a whole as the indigenous European people, right? As such, you can see them as culturally very, very old, right? These people have come originally from northern India, moved like centuries ago into Europe and have stayed in Europe for a very, very long time. All of them, and I do mean all of them, all of the people that I play with, that I played with, they all held down day gigs, right? They all saw, and they saw themselves as, this is my day gig, and this is my passion. This is my passion, and this is my day gig. It was interchangeable, right? There was no division between the idea of a creative person and a 9 to 5 person. Didn't exist for them, and I thought that was so. I mean, I cannot really express how different that mindset was coming from, a straight up 9 to 5 background or from a musician's background. For them, again, like for those people, these were families, these were tribal communities. The division between a creative job and a 9 to 5 job, a money or bills paying job, call it what you will, didn't exist. Like, they all saw themselves as creative. Didn't matter whether you were laying tiles 9 to 5 and then, picking up the bass playing bebop. It made no difference to them. All of them were writers, were graphic artists, writing not only books but plays, like all of it. It was an incredible, mind-opening environment to be in. And I think what you just talked about speaks to that very point. Like, for us musicians, we are in a very, very good position to open up, right? And to move with these changes that we see all around us. Having a full understanding that the only thing constant in the universe is change. That's it. Like, it doesn't, that is what it is. So Barry, thanks so much. Mark Gross, what's going on? I wanted to talk to you. I've saved the best for last. Not true. But I wanted to get to you now, because I started the panel today, telling the audience that whatever our second, third streams of income are or is, right? It doesn't necessarily need to be something huge. Like, sure, I develop real estate. I'm a landlord. Like, okay, but it didn't start that way. But in a very real way, my private students pay part of my bills. Okay. Yeah. And you took the whole teaching to another level. And that's why I wanted to talk to you today.
Sure, absolutely. Well, let me say a couple of things before I get into that. The first thing I want to say is I want to refute your Broadway statement that we don't go home and listen to all Broadway stuff. All these CDs are all Broadway musicals. So I just want to put that out there. I mean, that's all I listen to.
That's all you listen to.
That's nothing else. Yeah. Second thing I want to say, in all seriousness, is talking about diversifying your efforts. The fact that you've created this platform here to bring artists such as what you have here, and you've been doing it for over a year, is tremendous, and it feeds into a little of the backdrop of my story. And I'll say that because imagine if when we were young artists, there was such a thing as we could go on, well, I don't know if it was the internet when we were there, but we had a resource of being able to hear pearls of wisdom from Sarah Vaughan or Dizzy Gillespie or John Coltrane I mean, there are some interviews you got to dig deep for them, absolutely.
Yeah.
But this is tremendous, and it feeds to my story before I get to the education thing, because my story kind of came full circle. So when I graduated from Berkeley, and also to the point of not having any kind of advice or pearls of wisdom as to what is the next step, I graduated and literally thought to myself, what do I do now? I've spent 4 years in a practice room, transcribing, shedding. Now what do I do? So I found myself walking the streets of Boston. I wandered into the Boston Conservatory, and there was a little call board in there, auditions for a Broadway, or what they call bus and truck, Broadway show. Of course, I tear the paper off. It was sophisticated ladies.
Right.
Tore the paper off. Long story short, I go through the audition process, and they say, you did very well, but our next stop is going to be New York, and then after New York, we're going to make our final decision. But you're being considered, but we got to go to New York. And of course, I'm thinking, well, once they get to New York, it's a wrap. It's New York. So get to New York. The person did get the gig, but he did not take the job. He said, I'm going to go out with this up and coming trumpet player, this guy by the name of Wynton Marsalis. And the alto player was Wessel Anderson, who was one of my dearest of friends. So to this day, every time I see Wes, I say, thank you, bro. Jumpstart my career. So I spent 10 months traveling through Europe doing a Broadway music. But again, it's kind of what Sean and some others have alluded to. This is just in the moment. This is just a gig in the moment. I'm just trying to pay some bills. I ain't thinking about nothing past having fun, save a few dollars, get to the next town or country and complete the process.
Yeah.
Tour ends in 10 months. I literally had saved up about $3,000 in that 10 months. But my goal was always to get to New York. So that's what I do. I get to New York. And, I got to New York. It was about 1988 or 89. Rent was only about $500-600. So I was like, cool. I had enough money to pay first and last month's rent and then figure out the rest. So I get in the apartment. And again, this is what I mean by coming full circle. Now I'm thinking, like, what do I do now? Well, I was like, well, I had some buddies from Berkeley I would call up and they refer me to some gigs, but little $50 gigs, nothing nearly long-term or significant, just little runoffs. Then I thought to myself one day, I said, wait a minute, I went to a college, my major was performance, but I have a degree. At the very least, I can get what was called then a teaching certificate. I can be a day-to-day sub.
Right.
All right. But again, I'm just thinking I got to get some income. I do just enough of that so that I knew that my bills were covered.
Right.
Then getting to some of the other points Sean and others were talking about with, how seemingly insignificant a bachelor's degree is. And now in the educational realm, it's almost kind of a mandate that you have a master's or absolutely a doctorate. I don't have either of those. I just have a bachelor's. But I wasn't wise enough to think it at the time, but I was wise enough to know, because I wanted to be a jazz musician, I have to just put myself in that pool of where that's happening. So it was early in my career coming to New York that I found myself in the kitchen, sitting down, talking with Art Blakey, talking with Max Roach, talking with Elvin Jones, eventually sitting in quite frequently with Art Blakey, then getting to meet, Freddie Hubbard. So I won't go down the names of all these people, but a significant amount of jazz artists I've been privy enough to work with. And I don't mean just runoffs. I mean like significant time on the road, to the point where their numbers, if a lot of them have passed, are in my phone. They call me, dub me nicknames and things of that nature. All right. So now, all through that process as well, I found myself, because of that, again, that initial Broadway show, the guy, it was kind of a two-starter in that, because it was a Duke Ellington musical, Sophisticated Lady,
Hmm.
a lot of the guys from the Duke Ellington Orchestra were in that show. So when we got back to New York, they immediately went to Mercer Ellington and was like, Mercer, you need to check this dude out. So I was
Hmm.
always going to Carol's studio. This is the old Carol down there on 41st or wherever.
41st.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was always in there, and he, after a while, I would just show up with my horn, just unannounced. I found out they rehearsed, and I just show up. He's like,
Right.
"Who's this dude? Just keep coming here with a saxophone." Eventually, one day, he invited me to sing the sax. All right, all of that. Now, again, and this is over a 20-year or so span of just really being entrenched in this kind of sorry, my light is going in and out. I'm like,
No
come on,
worries.
stop it. Um, of this kind of, exposure to these artists. So now that kind of turned into, when we would be on the road, a lot of, particularly with Mercer and then some other bands, we would play at a lot of colleges where they would couple master classes with the performance aspect. And
Right.
he would always come to me and be like, would you feel comfortable running a
Ooh.
master class for the saxophones? Would you
Check
be
that out.
comfortable talking to blah, blah, blah? Absolutely. I can. How much time I got? I can
Yeah.
talk to them for hours if they have the time.
You want me to
And-
talk
and
about
again,
saxophone? Yeah.
Exactly. And check this out. So now I'm talking to them about saxophone from the lens of what it means to play in a big band, having sat next to a James Moody, having sat next to a Jimmy Heath, having sat next to or talked with a Frank West, having like the list goes on, right?
Right.
So talking to them about all those kind of perspectives, or get into theory and talk about theoretical things that I've sat on countless occasions in the kitchen at the Vanguard talking to Charles McPherson or George Coleman and others about their harmonic concepts.
Right.
So, and then that led into me taking adjunct positions at Rutgers, at Princeton, at Groningen in the Netherlands,
Right.
at the New School, a whole host of other things. So I found myself now being able to articulate all of the concepts and the ideology of what it means to be a practitioner to that student, to that same Mark Gross who graduated from this prestigious school and had no direction. Now I'm able to give them some guidance, some better guidance, and hope that that will help them. And also even deeper. Okay, so let me get to that. So that led up to me now. One of my current positions is I'm the director of jazz at NJPAC.
Wow.
I came into that position in the early 2000s. It's going to go in and out. If
Yeah,
it both go out,
don't even
yeah,
worry about it. It's
yeah.
all good.
I'm gonna bring the light. I'm gonna bring the light with the words. The words. The truth is the light, and the light shall set you free. All right. So
Could not have said it better.
there you go. Now, with all of this acquired knowledge and information, I'm at NJPAC, and I got there. NJPAC was founded in the early 2000s, about 2000.
Right.
Got there almost at the second year of the inception of the institution, where at the time Don Braden was the director of the program.
Right.
So now I'm finding myself really able to articulate to these young aspiring minds about what is required if they want the pursuit of becoming a musician. But not only that, what the totality of that means.
Right.
Everybody is not going to come out as that player. You might want to be a teacher. You might want to be an engineer. You may just want to be someone who's gotten a deeper, broader awareness and appreciation for the art form. You know what I mean? So now in the last 7 years, I've been the director of that program. And again, thinking again about my experience, I found it necessary to think about leveraging a lot of the partnerships and the things that have been availed to me. I'm in a position now where, because I've been 30 years plus out of Berkeley, I've formed direct partnerships with the college that offers scholarships to students, summer programming, Manhattan School of Music, Juilliard, Rutgers, of course, you name it. And the alumni of students that I've been able to afford those opportunities. Again, I'm always thinking about me, that young kid who came from Baltimore, All he had was that, that saxophone, the number 2 reed that was kind
Right.
of chipped, but I made it work.
Right.
Wanted
Right.
to go to Boston. My mom saved up enough money, put me
Right.
on a one-way ticket up to Boston. They need that. They need this. They need someone who's able to advise them in ways that will help further along or position them a little better for, help set them up for success as best that we can.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, away from the music, me too. I'm one who's been fortunate in that everything that I do, it always comes back to the music. But over the course of years, I've found myself using my privilege in the context that I've been able to establish in ways that is not about me anymore. It's about me because I was able to get, quote unquote, Sean Edmonds the gig, or because I was able to get Jeffrey, in the direction he wanted to go to,
Right.
then I can sit back and just be cool. I don't have to, get the flowers. The flowers is in seeing them succeed or be able to better do what they want to do.
Right,
know?
right, 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 right.
Yeah.
No, that makes a lot of sense. No, thank you
Yeah.
so much for spelling all of that out. I think that again, like I wanted you to talk to the teaching, but I knew that there was a bigger story behind the teaching, and the because it's not only just okay, well, play this scale and play that scale, and these are the rhythms over here, and this is how you hold the bow, and
Yeah. Well, sometimes it is that.
as much as that is necessary,
Right.
I totally get that, but it
Right.
also goes like a step beyond, like
Is so much deeper, and especially when you think about just recently what we're dealing with, this pandemic, and how it's affected everybody.
Yeah.
Imagine that student who now they don't have an instrument anymore because the schools are closed, and the instrument they were using was from the school, or they can't go to band class anymore because all those things have ceased.
Right.
That's not a priority anymore.
Right. Right.
So it goes beyond the effect of us. I mean, and that is significant too. And I think it, Melissa and everyone kind of spoke to it about the not only the mental and physical wellness of taking care of ourselves.
Yeah.
Because again, if we don't take care of ourselves, we're not 100 to take care of anybody else.
Right. Right. Right.
I'm
right.
gonna be like, I'm 5 minutes into your lesson, George. I'm gonna be like, yeah, man, it's a drag. I know I'm supposed to be teaching you how to play the bass, but man, it's a drag, George. You can be like, what kind of lesson is going on right now?
This is weird.
This is weird. Anyway.
No, that makes what you're saying is so true. Absolutely. So again, thanks so much for sharing all of that. It's important, in my opinion, for people out there. And yes, George's Bass Chat has an audience. That's a reality at this point, right? Thank you. But it's important for people to understand, like, and I wanted to open this particular question up to everyone. The idea of either or versus I'm doing this plus, meaning I am a working musician plus I'm doing something else, right? What are thoughts that, to a certain degree we've already touched on that, but what are the first couple thoughts that come to your mind? So it's either or versus one plus the other. Who wants to take that? Go ahead, Barry.
In Chinese medicine, we never give one herb. We give herbs together because the effect of them together and how they interact together, that's what creates the power of the formula to heal the person.
Wow.
Just like we never put just one needle in. There's always, because we're multi-layered and multi-dimensional. I think a lot of this might just have to do with like some old constructs of commerce, maybe, that you have to like do one thing. Because if you look back into like Confucius talks about the 12 excellences, right? That every human being should know something about healing, know how to cook, know how to write poetry, know some movement, whether it's martial or just for self-cultivation. Like there's all these things in the Middle East tradition. Al-Ghazali talks about a similar thing, that a complete human being should cultivate all these aspects of what it is to be human. So I think this thing of like one thing and that's it. And the beauty of that multi-dimensional thing is that all those things inform the other things. So I think I'm a better trumpet player because I'm a martial artist. I think that I'll be a better Chinese medicine practitioner because I've been a musician my whole life and a martial artist. Exactly. I think that all that stuff just feeds into one another. And we're like these we're so complex as beings to say it's either this or it's that kind of dogmatic. I mean, it doesn't work in music, right? The best musicians are the ones that can flow with whatever's going on. Like that's
so
very why would we not take that into like this realm as well? Like, so I don't really understand people that think that way.
Yeah. Thank you, Barry. Go ahead. Wait, we're getting a message from Melissa. Oh, you got to run, Melissa. Okay. Listen, no worries. Thank you so much for being here today. Really appreciate your time. Any parting words? You got 2 minutes. Go for it.
Just thank you so much for doing this. I'm going to echo Mark in saying that it's been truly inspiring to see what you've been developing here. And it's been so great to hear everyone's stories. And I hope to see you all in person soon.
All right. See you soon, Melissa. Thank you so much for being here today. All right. So anybody else? Either or versus one thing plus the other. Go ahead, Sean.
You know, being a student, even to now, you know, something that the students have today that we didn't have are more choices. I noticed a lot of the students today graduating school are already into the day trading on the phone.
Right.
You know, and you don't really even have to tell them to do that. They're already doing it. You know, they're inspired by their parents. You know, of course, there are more opportunities to see things like that on TV, you know, that we didn't have when we were kids. I mean, when I was growing up in the late 60s, early 70s in Georgia, there were only 3 channels on the TV. There wasn't an economics channel and all of that, you know.
Yeah.
So that's part of it. Also, like what Barry was saying about the technology, I think that kind of goes hand in hand now in college and education, where it wasn't really like that when we were coming up so much, especially for a guy like me who majored in classical music in school, you know. Right. So the choices are right there for you if you're willing to see that, you know. And I think kids going to school nowadays, they're smart enough to realize that it's not necessarily an either or. It's a let's do these things together,
right?
You know, to better ourselves. Because the one thing that they seem to know better than we did when we were coming up is that the job market is really competitive today. Right. You know, we weren't necessarily aware of that, you know, when we were coming up.
Right.
Yeah.
No, that you totally you're so on point with that is concerned. I do believe, and I did wanted to add to that. I believe that there is a generational shift. Okay, I do see it in my students. I do see it in younger musicians. I see, you know, the generational shift between like my peer group and you know, my elders. Let me put it this way, right? The understanding of let me break down where I'm coming from. Okay, I'm coming from a culture of, if you're a bass player, you do not play the piano, you just play bass. That's it. Okay, playing the piano was already seen as a distraction to being a bass player. Okay, and we all know like how intricately interwoven a harmonic idea or harmonic knowledge is to whatever instrument you play, right? So the elders I'm talking about, you know, come from a mindset of, not all of them, of course, come from a mindset of you only play your instrument and that's it, right? And that really goes back to 30s. I mean, that's, you know, that goes way back, right? Compare that to, say, my generation or the generation that's coming after me, or several generations at this point, where it's not even a thought anymore. Like, I remember very clearly when I was studying, and I was blown away. I went to Berkeley for a summer semester. I was blown away by fellow students who had their main instrument, of course, but were killing on other instruments and didn't even think about it. Didn't like it was not even it never even occurred to them that that was something special. Whereas for me, where I was coming from, and perhaps that also is part of Vienna, where it's very classical and very kind of strict. That was unheard of. Like you are some kind of genius that you are able to play the drums and the saxophone and the trumpet and this and the other. For them, it was second nature, right? So there is a generational shift happening. In my opinion, that's very, very obvious, and that continues on into what Sean was just saying, where nowadays students, online trading, they figured out the phone, in their diapers, while I'm still over here trying to send a text. Okay, reality. Mark, you wanted to say something?
No. To your point of I think it the point of you play bass and that's only what you play and blah blah blah. I think it also, and Sean alluded to it too, the art form, the discipline, like jazz versus classical music.
Right.
I could totally see that in the classical world where if you play piano, that's all you better be touching. I don't want to see you picking up a flute or drumsticks. But and also in the jazz world, as we all well know, you talk to any of those older guys, Dizzy or Miles or Jimmy Heath, they played piano. Yeah, exactly, Barry, very well, which is why they were proficient not only on their horn, but in the way they wrote music.
Right.
You could hear it in their composition. Slide Hampton, the list goes on and on and on. So what I find interesting is that the generation of my generation, there were a few who heeded that advice and did that. But now I think it's just like, it's like you're saying, it's kind of crazy. Like the talent that, younger musicians, they'll sit behind the drums and you think you play drums. Oh no, I actually play trombone, or
exactly
in our orchestra,
Yeah.
It's
no, that's exactly what I'm talking about. This you could have fooled me. Like I thought you were a drummer.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. There is an incredible shift in understanding, and again, like we're coming back to sort of the point that I was trying to make with these panels, the redefinition of what it means to be a musician, right? This definition is shifting, and this is not, and this is my second or maybe last point that I'll make. I would even take it as far as saying it has always changed, because again, like our definition of whatever we're doing, we're not working. Take it out of the music field, take it into transportation. We're not, driving around horse and buggy anymore. Okay, we got cars, we got such a thing as a train, airplanes, etc., etc. Things are constantly changing, and I think that perhaps this diversifying your efforts is more of, perhaps you could even put it that way. It's a manifestation of a universal constant change, right? That we as musicians have to sort of open ourselves up to. If, who's to say, if we don't do that, chances are our art form, our mode of expression might very well suffer from it. It's hard to say whether anything, I'm having a hard time, being concrete about it, because I don't necessarily believe in stuff being set in stone, but that's just what it seems to me. Barry, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to just riff off of what you were saying. Darwin, originally people were saying like the strong survive, but actually he was talking about the ability to adapt.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I think that's what you're talking about, really, is the ability to adapt. And I think a lot, like maybe what we're really talking about in a macro or a more meta way of looking at it is not what it means to be a musician, but what does it mean to be a human being? Like, are we meant to pick this thing, do this thing, however much we may love it and be great at it for the rest of our lives? Is that what we want? Or is there another possibility? And it doesn't detract from that thing.
Exactly.
And I, you know, the interesting thing is when I kept it kind of quiet that I was doing the Chinese medicine thing for a while, but the younger people, like, oh, wow, that's cool. Like, for them, like, having a bunch of different stuff happening, like, that's what you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
Like, the people my age were the kind of like, there was some kind of like dissonance between, well, does that mean you're not going to play anymore? Well, no, of course it doesn't mean I'm not going to play. You know, like, but there's some kind of a shift in mindset that needs to happen. And I'm not sure, again, I'm not sure, is that a cultural thing? Is it how we're programmed? Is all that a byproduct of constructs of being able to make a living in the marketplace and all that? Or an old version of that? Because the new version to me is like, you got to have lots of stuff going on. Otherwise, you know, it's like EQ, you know, like if this comes down, this got, like, there has to be this different stuff going on. So I don't know, you know, but it's good to have these conversations. And for me, it's been great to hear all of your stories, because it reinforces what I've kind of had a suspicion that this transformation, like, I was peeping this out like 2001, that, man, I see the handwriting on the wall, and a lot of people are going to get blindsided if they don't start changing the way they think. And a lot of people didn't, in part because I think that their sense of self-worth and self-identity are so entwined with, I play this instrument and I do this thing. And if that doesn't happen, therefore I'm not successful. I lose my identity. And I think that we need to look much more like deeper into ourselves. Anyways, I'm babbling. But
I just want to add just quickly to that, because I think that's a really, really key point you mentioned, in that it's really about how we define ourselves, and when we can break out of the shell of what others may perceive that to be, being able to diversify what you do, you can do whatever you can do it all, right? But if your mindset is kind of with the blinders on, thinking that, oh, if I do this, if I do a Broadway show, you know, the jazz cat's gonna look at me funny, or if I do, you know, if I play a rock and roll gig, you know, what? If you know what I mean? If those things speak to you, or even to your point, George, I wish I knew. I'm in the process of now having to redo my deck, and I'm trying the best that I can to do it. If I had the skill of a George Farmer to go out in my backyard and just rip it all down and build a new deck, and then I could, you know, do a jam session and bring it all full circle again, man, it's like, I think we can, whatever the things that we choose to do should speak to who we are as people first. Because again, like we've said, any of these things can be taken away from us tomorrow. So does that mean that now I'm no longer Mark Gross? No, I would hope not. Yeah.
Most definitely. You make so much sense. Jeffrey, you had something.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think we have a built-in dilemma, unfortunately, in that I would, you know, what is happiness? But the happiest people I know seem to understand moderation. They understand balance. Most people that achieve excellence don't understand either of those things. Go hang out with Tiger Woods or Neil Armstrong or Prince. Let me know how well balanced these cats are. You know, so to be excellent, and let's face it, we're all here in New York, so we've already identified ourselves as saying, I want to be the top of the heap. We wouldn't have moved here. Lenny Pickett said to me one time, no half-stepping in New York. There's not. Get out of the way. Either do it or get out of the way. So I feel like as we age, gain the wisdom of, hey, I need some balance in my life, some moderation in my life. And so it's a trade-off we make. You know, somebody said to me one time, oh, I had some friends over to the house playing guitar Saturday night. They're not like you. They do it because they love it. And I was like, what do you mean? I've given my entire life to music.
Exactly.
I mean, who loves golf more, me or Tiger Woods? I'm the world's worst golfer. I bet I have more fun on the golf course than he does, because that's what he does for a living. So we trade something in when we do this as our profession. But that's a choice we made. You know, I've always heard, you don't choose music, it chooses you.
Yeah. There's a lot to that. There's no doubt.
Excellence does not come cheap.
Right.
And we have to make a choice. And so, you know, again, I'm trying to get to the point now of understanding balance and moderation. Yeah. But boy, we all had to invest decades to get to the level that we could work in this town. So
I mean,
we around the edges as we get older.
Here's the thing. I mean, I totally hear what you're saying. I do believe that, you know, in order to find balance, in order to find sort of the middle ground, you do have to explore the extremes. Otherwise you don't know what is what. I mean, that's a reality. Now, how you explore the extremes might mean one thing to me, might mean a whole nother thing to everybody else on this planet, okay? But the reality is that we need to find, you know, where our ceiling, where our base is, you know, no pun intended, but that's, you know, in order to find that particular balance, that active balance, right? And I think that's a very, very good, that's a very good point. I'm gonna, because we've been on already for like an hour and a half. I'm gonna finish, start wrapping it up with that. The active balance is exactly what perhaps this diversifying your efforts is about, right? Where you are able to move on several avenues at the same time, right? I think that makes a lot of sense. I do want to put one more idea out there. I do these follow-up videos, right? And one of my guests on the follow-up videos has been super kind and gracious with his time is Branford Marsalis. In one of the last videos that I'm about to release in a couple weeks, he's talking about, you know, the playing, people playing on a bandstand, band playing together, but instead of playing together, they're kind of playing next to each other, right? And what I thought is interesting with that is that this playing together means being able to adapt, right? It means being able to sort of see ourselves as multidimensional beings, to acknowledge that, right? In a way of acknowledging, okay, this player plays this particular instrument really well, I should say, and also has interests somewhere else. It's not just that he plays or she plays this instrument really well, right? So we are starting to redefine the people we work with, we play with, right? And through that redefinition, that makes it able for us to play with someone as opposed to next to someone, right? I think that with a diversified efforts, right, makes it able for us to see ourselves as multidimensional beings, and therefore, first of all, seeing ourselves as multidimensional beings, and therefore see our environment as such as well, right? And once again, that feeds into the creative output. That feeds into the immediacy. That's the word I was looking for. Immediacy of being able to communicate to an audience. Because our boss, after all, and we know this because we are in the pandemic, our boss is the audience, okay? And nobody else. So in order to speak to the audience better, perhaps diversifying your efforts helps us understand ourselves better, right? And therefore make a creative output more understandable, right? And in the end, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to communicate. Music is a means of communication. I think that's understood, right? So having said all of that, and what a discussion this has been. I want to thank you all so much for making yourselves available. This means the world to me. It means the world to the audience out there. I think this is some really good information that hopefully people can, you know, that hopefully will resonate with people. That's all. Like we can't really tell everybody do this. You know, this that's not where I'm coming from. But hopefully hopefully it will resonate with people, and they sort of see themselves in you know, our stories, in our experiences, and in our insights. So once again, I want to thank all of you. I want to thank the awesome Melissa Tong, who had to go and teach right now, talk about, you know, diversifying your efforts. Hello. And I want to thank Sean Edmonds, Barry Danilian, Mark Gross, Jeffrey Lee Campbell. Thank you all so much for being here today. I'm going to sign off with what I say every week, which is, everyone out there, be cool, be kind, and remember we only have each other. And I'll see you all next week. All right, later.
All right, George.
Thank you.